Red shift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. There's this idea put out by the media that having premarital sex is a normal thing. The whole idea is to push premarital sex. Now, if they were really trying to destigmatize or take away the shame of normal behavior, that would be one thing. But that's not what they're doing, because Christianity was never ashamed of sex when it was within the bounds of marriage like it should be. So they're trying to destigmatize negative things, things that should not be destigmatized. I mean, look at how much society has already been annihilated by premarital sex. It's just utterly insane. But furthermore, you're not supposed to be treating lightly this thing that can ruin your life. That is sex. Sex creates babies. That's what it's for. You're not supposed to be doing that shit unless you have the money to take care of a child, and unless you want to spend the rest of your life with this woman, because, number one, even if you don't end up together, that's bad for the kid. And number two, you're going to still have to see and deal with this woman for the next 18 years at least, right? That's not something you fuck around with, right? You're going to fuck up your kid by the parents being split up, if she decides to have the child, if you get her pregnant. And number two, you're going to have to deal with her, and maybe you don't want to, because, if you're not together, you're probably not getting along, and that's not good for the kid. Co-parenting is not ideal, you shouldn't fuck around with that. Sex really should be kept only within the bounds of marriage, not to mention the spreading of STDs that premarital sex creates. I mean, Jesus Christ, look at how prevalent STDs are today compared to how they were in the 50s or something, hardly anybody had premarital sex back then, so hardly anybody got STDs. Now it's I can't remember what it is, 1 in 4 people or something? I can't remember what it is, but it's insanely high, the percentage of Americans that have, STDs. It's absolutely insane. Yeah, but they're acting oh, that's not that big deal. They even have those stupid shows like Adam Explains Everything, where he's talking about oh, herpes is not that big a deal, actually. Give me a fucking break. Get the fuck out of here with that shit. They're trying to act oh yeah, don't worry about getting herpes. Don't worry about STDs. That's fucking ridiculous. They're just trying to destroy society because they're total psychopaths, these people at the top. So it's fucking ridiculous that they're trying to destigmatize premarital sex when it should be stigmatized. The stigmatization of premarital sex is not the same as the stigmatization of sex. They act like it is, but it's not. Number 3, they can actually paradoxically, or seemingly paradoxically, they can lower the white birth rate by promoting premarital sex, because it really does depend when you do things. When you do things really does affect your life. If you have a baby at a young age, like at 18 or 20, then it's really destructive to your earning ability over your life, because you're not able to amass the seed corn to start your own business or to invest it intelligently and then make a lot of money. You're not able to do that because you have to spend that money on the child, so you end up way more impoverished during your lifetime compared to if you had waited until you were 30 years old to have a child, when you're married and financially well off. Not to mention you might have to pay child support for a kid you don't even get to see all that much. And then you marry another woman, and then you have to be able to afford another kid with her in order to get her to stay with you, or to get her to marry you in the first place. So then you have to pay for another woman, because the welfare for your first child is probably, or the child support for your first child is probably, going a lot to the woman, not to the child, right? So you're really paying for 2 women and 2 children, right? And of course she's going to get every ounce of child support that she can get out of you, and she's going to siphon money from the government, which is money stolen from you also in the form of taxes to pay for that welfare, So it means you're going to be more poor, or at least the average man is going to be more poor in society when you have a society like that due to premarital sex. And thus you won't be able to have as many white babies throughout your life. Thus destigmatizing of premarital sex lowers the white birth rate. Right? But if you had waited until your wedding night to lose your virginity, then you would not have had to pay child support. You would have been able to advance your career more without it being hamstrung by the expense of a child. That is, you would only have kids once you were able to, before, rather than having a kid early and it stunting the growth of your career. Right? If you have your kid when you want to, then your career is already as developed as you think it should be. And then having a kid doesn't stunt the growth of your career, or at least not in the same critical way. Maybe it slows down the growth of your career after that, but your career was already pretty well established by that time, so you're okay. So you can have more kids because you're making more money, because your career was not stunted by having a child early because of premarital sex, you see? And plus, you'll be able to see your kid every day. and thus you'll be able to have a much better moral and intellectual influence on your kid when you have a kid in wedlock rather than out of wedlock. And because you'll be richer, not only will you be able to raise the kid with more piano lessons and karate lessons and all the rest of it, Spanish lessons or Chinese, Mandarin lessons, whatever, so your kid's better educated, but you can also, save more money for your kid to go to college or start a new business or whatever, and then you can get your kid a head start on life. You can buy your kid his first house or whatever, even if it's only a tiny little house, and then you can help your kid avoid the debt slavery of taking out a loan for a house from a bank. You see, so having kids in wedlock is better all the way around for the father, for the mother, for all of society, for the kids, etc. I mean, it's just better in every way, and having kids out of wedlock is just bad in every way. So you'd be happier and you'd be wealthier, and thus you'd be able to have more kids as well. And thus the eugenic effect of, having a lot of kids would come into play more. Because maybe your first kid would not be great, but maybe your third or fourth kid would be great, would be the best of both, of both your wife and your genes. And thus, if you'd only had one or two kids, you would never have gotten that great kid. But because you had three or four, you got a kid that was way better than all the other kids. That was a best of combination of you and your wife's genes. And thus that kid gets to be born. And then that kid probably has a lot more kids than any of your other kids do because he makes a lot more money. You see, so it's actually eugenic to be having more kids as well. You'd be able to have maybe 3 or 4 kids with your wife instead of one with your ex-girlfriend and one with your wife. Even if you do marry the girl who you accidentally get pregnant when you're 20 years old, you cripple the growth of your career or your finances, like I said before. It's like having a preemie baby. It's bad for the baby's health to be born significantly prematurely. Significantly, it's bad for a man's earning ability to have to start taking care of a child early instead of being able to spend his 20s growing his career and investing in his career, instead of paying to take care of his first child. When your career doesn't get the proper development time because it's born early, it makes it so you can't do as much education or whatever, and then you're never able to advance your career as much as you otherwise would have been able to do if you had not gotten a girl pregnant. You're stuck earning a smaller amount of money each year for the rest of your life. So it's not like it's easy for a woman, and it's not like it's easy, it's not like it's not easy for a woman to get pregnant, right? It's quite easy for her to get pregnant. She can poke holes in your condoms or tell you she's on the pill or has an IUD and be totally lying. And you're more likely to believe her because you don't want to believe she's lying. You want to believe her because you don't want to use a condom if you don't have to. And so she can easily trick you into getting her pregnant by simply lying to you. And this technique of promoting premarital sex is doubly effective at getting rid of white people by getting women pregnant earlier and making sure they have fewer kids thereby. Getting people to get women pregnant out of wedlock. And so then the added pressure of having a baby before either of them are ready means that they'll probably break up as a couple. And then the son will grow up a lot more cowardly because of not seeing his father enough because of his parents not being a couple anymore and the mother getting primary custody. And then this will make that son less aggressive and less likely to fight for the survival of his own race and freedom and all the rest of it, right? And so, morality will die, the country will die. Masculinity will die, the white race will die because all white men are cowards because of having been raised by mothers and barely getting to see their fathers, right? These cuck boys will allow their race to go extinct. And this will allow, and these guys will allow their tyrannical government to enslave him, will allow women to dominate him, etc. This is not a good thing. This is another way they destroy the white race by, promoting premarital sex. And the technique of promoting premarital sex is triply effective because if the couple doesn't end up together because of the stresses of having a child before the couple was ready, then the woman is open to dating someone else, perhaps a person of another race, like a black guy. This is what one chick from Teen Mom 2 did, right? Her first child was born from a guy that might have been Latino, although he looked white, or at least fairly white. Her second baby daddy was Latino, although he looked more Latino, but he was still fairly white looking. And then her third baby daddy was black. This means that she's having more babies of other races and fewer purely white babies, right? If she had stayed together with, the first guy she was with, let's say he was a white guy, because in a lot of cases that would be the case, then she would have had, 3 kids, but they all would have been white. But, allowing premarital sex makes sure the relationships don't last. So she bounces from guy to guy to guy, and some of those guys are guys of other races. Therefore, if she has the same amount of babies, but she, has some that are other races, that means she's having fewer white babies than she otherwise would have been, thus slowly breeding the white race out of existence. And then those siblings will have less of a bias. Those kids who have, one, half sibling who's white, one half sibling who's Latino, one half sibling who's black, then those kids, those white kids who are purely white, will have a less of a bias toward breeding with people of their own race because of having a mulatto sibling. And then this will mean that they themselves would be more likely to miscegenate, to marry a black woman, thus making it so that even fewer white children are born to that generation. Like that when they start breeding, the sons and daughters of single mothers who have miscegenated for one of their children are like, if a woman miscegenates, it's going to make it more likely that her kids are going to miscegenate too, and then that further breeds white genes out of existence, white people out of existence, right? And they're destigmatizing out of wedlock pregnancy as well, thus making it so that young guys and young girls are less scared of having a child out of wedlock. And then only after they're raising the child do they realize how incredibly difficult it is, and how incredibly stupid they were to be callous and cavalier and reckless enough to have a child out of wedlock and act like it was no big deal, right? But until it happened, and then they see that it's like, holy shit, we shouldn't have done this, right? But of course, by that time, it's too late. The option of dropping the kid off at a police station or a fire department still exists, but the young mother is unlikely to do that because she's already in love with the child, no matter how hard it is to raise her child. That's why we need to have no welfare for single mothers and no child support, because only then will it be too hard to raise a kid out of wedlock. And thus only then can you get women to go against their natural instinct and do the right thing and give the child up for adoption or give it to an aunt or an older cousin or something like that, so that she doesn't have her life ruined by being a single mother at a young age, and so that she's able to have the child be raised by someone who will do a better job of raising the child than she would. A couple who has a decent amount of money, unlike the young mother. Right? And destigmatizing single motherhood makes people less wary about engaging in premarital sex. And this makes people more likely to have sex with more people before they get married. This means that whites, both women and men, are more likely to miscegenate as they go through life fucking tons of people, and this normalizes miscegenation, and then that itself results in more mixed-race marriages and more mixed-race babies with lower IQs, and this breeds whites out of existence this way as well. Especially with men having lower SMV, because women are more likely to miscegenate, and men are forced to then marry mulatto girls because there's more of them and fewer white girls, and the white girls have a higher SMV because they're better looking and because they have higher IQs, and therefore this means that, that's further forcing both, getting white women and white men to miscegenate and therefore breed whites out of existence. And if you have no welfare and no child support or anything for single mothers, then this means that they'll be forced, these single mothers, to, give the baby up for adoption. And then when she marries and has kids that she does get to keep later on in life, 5-10 years later, whenever it is that she gets married, let's say she has a kid when she's 16 or 17, she's having out of wedlock sex behind her parents' back. Then she gets pregnant, then her parents force her, and she doesn't want to, but she does it anyway because she knows she has no option. She gives the kid up for adoption because there is no welfare and no child support, so she'll get zero support and her parents refuse to help her adopt the kid, and therefore it's the case of she's going to, give the kid up for adoption, then she's going to be really kind of traumatized, really hurt by that. But then women like to perpetuate things, right? So if you, spank women, that makes it more likely for them to want to approve of spanking other women. Because it's like, if I have to be spanked, yeah, I'm going to make it so she has to be spanked too. Well, same thing here, right? Like, I had to give up my child, so, if any other girls get pregnant out of wedlock, I'm going to make them give up their baby too. It's sort of a vengeful thing. But this is almost, in a sense, the closest thing that women come to fairness, right? So you have to make women do the right thing, and if it hurts, that's just investment in them wanting to, force that on other women as well. Just because, I had to go through that pain of giving my baby up, so I'm going to make sure the next generation's girls, if my daughters get pregnant out of wedlock, they're going to give their babies up for adoption too, because I had to do it. You know what I mean? So then it makes it more likely that her kids will give their babies up for adoption too if they get pregnant out of wedlock like their mom did, because their mom had to, so their mom's going to make it sure that those daughters have to as well, right? So even if those bad genes get passed on, they're still having to do the same thing, that is, give the baby up for adoption, which makes it so that this is less destructive to society, and then that woman, that young girl, who had a daughter out of wedlock or a son out of wedlock and had to give it up for adoption, her SMV is less lowered now, especially if she does it in another city so no one knows she was ever pregnant. Then she marries some guy, some white guy, this white daughter does, this white girl, not the one who was given up for adoption, the one who got pregnant out of wedlock. She marries some white guy, and then she has a bunch of kids, whereas if she was a single mother, she's far less attractive to guys. And thus, maybe she can get a boyfriend, but he's probably going to be a low-status boyfriend. Maybe he can only afford to take care of the kid that she already has, or maybe he can only afford to give her one more kid. Whereas if she'd given the kid up for adoption, she'd have a higher SMV. She could marry a guy of her own race, a white guy, and then have 3 or 4 kids. You see? Especially if we're on sound money, which would make it so that everybody's richer. So everybody can have more kids. So, promotion of premarital sex is something that breeds white people, is something that, gets rid of white people. It's war against white people. It breeds white people out of existence and incentivizes them to breed less. And in many ways, it makes it so that white people disappear. This promotion of premarital sex does. And I think that's part of the reason that the Wandering Tribe promotes it, because they are at war against white people. They really, really are. They're pro-traditionalism in their own country, in their own communities, but they are anti-traditionalism when it comes to white people, because they know that traditionalism works, and they know that anti-traditionalism destroys. And so they're promoting anti-traditionalism in us, progressivism, so that they can destroy us. And even if that's not the intent, that's still the effect, and so we should still push back against all this promotion of premarital sex and stuff. And what is MGTOW doing? It's basically just promoting the idea of premarital sex just as much, if not more than ever before. So, MGTOW's not, fixing this problem. There's a reason that, pro-white, alt-right guys are opposed to MGTOWs. There's a fucking reason for that. It's because MGTOWs are anti-white, whether they realize it or not. Maybe not the MGTOW monks, but the MGTOWs who have sex with women and promote having sex with a lot of women and all this, these guys are anti-white. They are promoting something that is anti-white. And it's really that simple. And they really are very selfish and greedy and uncaring and nihilistic. And so, of course, they don't care about their own race. So, it is what it is. But, we need to fight this evil. This anti-white evil. And to fight anti-white evil, you have to fight premarital sex. It's really that simple. This has been Redshift. I hope someone got something out of this video. Peace trucks for nihilists, because actions do have consequences.